If you're here for active planning for a changing manufacturing landscape, hopefully you can see my screen. Today we're going to talk about planning specifically in manufacturing within Workday Adaptive Planning. So thanks everybody for being here. My name is Justin Dujardin. I'm one of the account executives here at Revelwood. I am joined by two of my colleagues, Lee Lazaro and Alberto Cañas. Lee is one of our planning practice leaders, and Alberto is one of our senior pre-sales solutions consultants. Lee's going to be talking to you a bit today about FP&A and strategy in the manufacturing space. And Alberto is going to be performing the actual demo within Workday Adaptive Planning. The important thing to know is that the demo is meant to just give you an idea of what you can expect out of the solution, but we certainly couldn't cover everything in a 45 or 1 hour webinar. So I just want to cover a few slides for housekeeping here before I pass it over to Lee, and then we're going to get it over to Alberto. So what we have on the agenda today, I'm going to give you a little bit of overview on who we are here at Revelwood. We're going to talk briefly about Workday Adaptive Planning and how powerful it is. Lee's going to talk about FP&A and manufacturing in the manufacturing space specifically. We're going to get it to Alberto for the demo. And then we're going to talk about some other considerations with Lee, and then we'll wrap things up just to give you an idea. So once again, we here at Revelwood, we are a partner of Workday Adaptive Planning. Now, we are a platinum business partner, which is the highest level. I know some people get confused by that. There's gold, silver. Platinum is the highest level of Workday partners, which basically means that we're part of an extremely select group of partners that help you evaluate and implement adaptive planning. We've done hundreds of successful implementations over the last few years with organizations of all sizes, and many of them are actually small business, and we're part of the select partner program for the small business market. And with that, we have very deep experience, specifically in the manufacturing space. That is an industry that Workday comes specifically to us for in North America. And so I only have a few slides I want to cover about adaptive, so we're going to keep it relatively high level. But adaptive planning is basically your modeling, reporting, and analytics all in one place. So everything that you need is in one solution, and it's going to act as your central source of truth, if you will. And typically we're talking with finance teams, and of course we're pulling in general ledger data, but adaptive can connect to really any data source that you need it to, because at the end of the day, data is data. And so you'll be able to bring all of that data together into one place, no matter where it's coming from, to model and report on that data with confidence. And this slide gives you an idea of some of the areas of the business that you can model and plan using adaptive. It is not limited to just core FP&A. You can model out really any operational area of the business that you want with adaptive planning. Now, adaptive runs on this elastic hypercube technology, which is a patented Workday technology, and this is a key competitive differentiator. I'm not going to talk about technical specifics because it isn't important for the purpose of this webinar, but the reason I'm bringing it up is because, well, it's key because it makes the solution scalable and able to have an unlimited number of dimensions and also an unlimited number of versions and scenarios. And when your system needs more processing power, the system is intelligent and expands to give it to you. But what's equally important is that you have all of this power without losing ease of use and maintainability. As you will see in the demo today, everything is extremely intuitive and adaptive, with drag and drop functionality so that the end users can actually own this system without assistance from IT. And we found that to be huge with our clients. And that specifically is one of the reasons why Adaptive has almost 6,000 customers globally in all industries. As you can see, you can probably see some names that you recognize in the manufacturing space, certainly no limitations of logos that we have here on Workday. And this slide just highlights some of those accomplishments of Workday and the adaptive planning product specifically. No competitor comes anywhere close to that many customers globally. Part of that is due to a 97% customer retention rate, which is a really crazy high retention rate, ranked really high by third-party research firms like Gartner. Workday has been ranked #1 on Fortune's Future 50 list, #2 on Forbes' Most Innovative, and that list includes companies like Tesla and Google. So that's a very impressive list to be on top of. And certainly no limitations of case studies. You can find plenty of case studies, specifically in the manufacturing space, on the adaptive planning website that I think should be helpful for you. And at this point, I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Lee to talk to you a bit about adaptive planning and how it relates to manufacturing.
All right, thanks, Justin. So let's start out by talking about the basics of FP&A. In essence, what does adaptive planning do related to the planning, the reporting, the analyses that help support these corporate decisions? So these tasks are broken down into 4 main categories. So the first category is the planning, and some people also reference this as budgeting. The details behind this are the various aspects of your income statement and your balance sheet planning. So some of the key elements that we see our customers deal with, things like revenue and COGS, expenses where you input the values and then get calculated results, and sometimes expenses where you simply just load the end results in. But no matter which approach you use for the calculations, there's a whole host of ways that you can do your planning within the solution. The adaptive solution provides methods for each of these components within your overall planning model. The second aspect of FP&A is the forecasting. And this allows you to update your plans into a way that I like to differentiate it. So why do I consider forecasting to be a little different than budgeting? Well, first off, the forecast combines data points. It combines your externally loaded actuals with your updated planning data. And secondly, the level of forecasting is usually different than the level from your original budget. This concept of calculations and the data merges, it's again part of the standard adaptive solution. From the reporting side, this is where the end results come into play. This is where we have the opportunity to look at our standard financials, our income statement, our balance sheet, put the two together, we've got our cash flow. But this is also where we have the opportunity to look at it within more granularity, by department, by person, by product. All of those aspects of by something is what we call slicing and dicing. And the ability to slice and dice your data, this is the main point of what you're going to see in today's demo. Okay. But the analysis, the final piece is the analysis, and this is where you put it all together. This is where we can then compare our data, do variances, looking at it at a dollar or a percentage, looking at version versus version, actual versus plan, actual versus forecast, budget versus the latest forecast. It's also where we have the ability to look at results in the pattern. We could see the trends, we could see the seasonality. We can look at our historical data to see what we had done, but utilize this as part of our future planning so we can help figure out where it goes. Okay? And we also have the ability to say, what if? When we're doing our planning, we don't like to limit ourselves to a single plan. Variables happen. We want to be able to utilize these variables to create multiple plans where I could look at a best case, worst case, most likely. Maybe what I have the ability to do is figure out, what if this little piece changes? But we have the opportunity to evaluate each of those pieces and then make the decisions. Okay? And this is where FP&A comes in. Finance is the centerpiece to every one of these aspects. So as you can see on the slide here, every one of these pieces eventually comes back to FP&A. For example, human resources works with FP&A for personnel planning. Sales works closely with you for the top half of your P&L, for your calculated COGS. IT needs to be able to plan for things like remote access, costs associated with new subscriptions and equipment. But the key factor in all of this comes down to the timing. It's your frequency. The frequency is tied to how quickly the facts are changing, but more importantly, how quickly you can turn those facts into actionable intelligence. And that word actionable is very important. If you can't turn the facts around quickly, then your results might be out of date by the time you pull it out together. This is why we want a fast and efficient planning solution, which is critical to your process. Now, what we just talked about was generic FP&A and generic planning. But what makes manufacturing a little bit different? Okay? Manufacturing you do your accounting a little bit different than standard, than other entities. The accounting approach, the way you categorize GAAP versus cost accounting, you look at it differently in your expenses. You break it down into what you may have remembered from your accounting classes as the cost accounting, direct materials, direct labor, overhead. You also want to think about the way that we're going to do our recognition, revenue recognition, cost recognition. Okay? And this is also where it's important in the manufacturing world to keep up with the rules. For those who've been in here for a while, back in the old days, we used to recognize revenue when your contract gets signed. But in 2019, GAAP updated their rules. And as you know, they stated that revenue is now recognized when goods and services are transferred. The concept of recognizing that revenue is something that we need to be flexible, not just in your process, but in the system that you use. You also break down your costs a little bit differently. Instead of just looking at your expenses, we categorize them as COGS versus OPEX. We probably have our chart of accounts differentiated a little bit because of that. And we also want to take a look at a little bit more metrics. We want to start looking at our volume calculations, break even, whole bunch of aspects of something per unit. We also want to think about our items, our inventory. So this is where we want to look at our categories. We don't want to just say we have inventory. We want to look at raw materials. We want to look at our WIP. We want to look at our finished goods. We want to be able to do analysis of each of those pieces as they come into play. We want to think about how are we going to depreciate? Are we going to use standard approaches like straight line, or are we going to use something like units of production? Okay. We also want to think about the planning for the creation of the inventory, all of our resources, all of our direct costs, but we also want to think of our direct labor, shift planning. And as we think about the supply chain, we want to think about our shipments. When we look at our shipments, we want to think about both in and out. We want to think about the sourcing of getting the shipments and the transportation back out. We want to think of our production scheduling, which is eventually going to lead into machine usage, downtime, maintenance. We want to think of where it's going to be, offshore versus domestic, which is also going to lead into financial currency concepts that come into play. Okay? And that all segues back into the specific metrics that we use in the manufacturing environment. This is going to look into our product and our inventory. We want to think about our cycle time from the order to the product release. We want to include WIP. We want to include finished good analyses. Okay. When we're looking at our absorption, we want to think about how are we going to account for some of these fixed costs? Are they allocated into the period when we're producing the product, or are we going to allocate them when the product is sold? We want to think about a lot of our regulatory. We want to think about accidents, near misses, in essence, anything associated with OSHA regulations that we need to report against. We want to think about our cost and profitability. A lot of the standard components that just come into play of what is our total profitability, but we want to be able to look at some metrics, cost as a percentage of revenue, percentage of profit. We want to be able to look at revenue per employee, revenue per unit. Okay? We want to be able to think of all those aspects. So how does adaptive planning help you perform these various FP&A tasks that we just talked about? I'm now going to turn this over to my colleague, Alberto, and he's going to show you the tool in action.
So everyone now should be able to see my screen with welcome to Workday Adaptive Planning. At the end of the day, today we're just going to spend some time highlighting how Workday Adaptive Planning will be able to help you and your organization, with your planning, forecasting, and reporting needs. As Justin mentioned, there's really no way that I can show you all that Adaptive has to offer in the next 25 minutes or so. But I will touch on many of these areas. Much of this is about the art of the possible. But as I go through the demonstration, and something does pique your interest, please feel free and reach out to us, and we will definitely be able to discuss further with you. Having said that, I will be focusing much of this presentation on the planning, reporting, and capabilities of Adaptive. Here, we're really going to take a look at several models that are going to be created in the sheets. Sheets are really just, where you're building your models. This is really, the main areas if you want to consider this like your Excel model that most organizations are currently working in. That's what we're really going to be living most of the demonstration in. But we also will look at a lot of different types of analytics. We're going to step into dashboards, take a look at some web-based reporting, and then we'll even round it all out with our Office Connect. It's an Excel add-in that comes with the suite of products. Having said that, now let's take a dive in. So the first area I really want to go into is kind of highlight some of the dashboarding capabilities. As you can see here, we have a lot of different tabs that you can add as you create different dashboards. You can have dashboards, as you can see here, just some verbiage, just kind of give the user some guidance. But as you continue going down the list or the different items you have here for your tabs, you'll see all the different visuals that you'll have, your charts, your graphs, things like that. So you'll be able to really pull in all sorts of data into Adaptive that you can see here. And not all of it has to just be strictly operational metrics. Here you can even see if you have any kind of CRM data that might be needed, maybe something like pipeline detail. Or if you want to have some sales data, perhaps we're building up units sold by groups or by capturing average prices and costs, even going down into the production side of it. Maybe we're thinking in terms of what the trends are going to look like, right? Or maybe we can even see how we can incorporate downtime to see even the overall effectiveness, right? So all those granular details are able to be brought into Adaptive. At the end of the day, any data that you bring into the solution can be displayed on one of these various dashboards that you're able to create. On top of that, any data point brought in can be used to drive logic in your plan. That is truly where the power of Adaptive comes from. So to really kind of highlight a few examples here, let me just walk you through some of these different visuals at your disposal. So some of the concepts here that I want to highlight, these are what things are really going to exist throughout the solution. One of them is the level structure. This is essentially the way you want to look at your organizational hierarchy. Very simple ways, maybe looking at your company, divisions, going down to departments, cost centers, but definitely you're not restricted to that. Some organizations have structure based on projects and such. So really, again, it's all up to you how you want to manage that. Maybe we can even break this down by individual manufacturing sites, or we can build up by plant, which allows you to assign different operational metrics and costs by plant, which is definitely a common approach. Your structure can also be multinational as I continue going down that list. So for those organizations that have business overseas, you can definitely incorporate that. Adaptive can most certainly be utilized to perform that currency exchange, as every base member is tagged with its given local currency. So that's one of those main items, the level. Next, you have the ability to incorporate different versions. Everything that you work on in Adaptive is always across a version. Our ability to truly understand our business is largely driven from this scenario analysis capability that you will have by having all these different versions at your disposal. Every user does have the ability to create new versions in a quick process. This is simply creating a complete copy of an existing version with all the logic intact. So now you can go into this new version, make changes like updating prices or costs, where you will immediately see those impacts to whatever updates have been made. So that right there is just another key piece. You're definitely even going to see a lot of different dimensions. You have the ability to create unlimited dimensions anytime you need to capture data with more granularity than just at that GL account level. You'll need to just simply spin up a new sheet and include those needed dimensions there to make your analysis. So now also, if you want to go down and drill down and see a little bit more detail behind the scenes, right? So let's actually take this data point here for the revenue stream. So now, based on all those different dimensions and data that you have in here, just click into it. So now you can start, following that bouncing ball, if you will. So we're just going to simply go down by level, breaks it down, keep going a little bit further down that level structure. Again, just kind of keeps going down your structure as we go. So now you have US, keep going a little bit further, shows you the different areas, right? Your departments, your plants, and such. And now even go a little bit further. Maybe you want to look at it by product that you have. So now you can even go even further beyond that Maybe you want to look at it by customer, right? So this just gives you that sense that it's very easy from by a couple clicks, you can go from that top of the house down to that lowest level that you're really interested in. But this data is really just linked to, in instance, the different revenue count, which will automatically create this drill path. That ability to follow that bouncing ball wherever the analysis dictates is just, how powerful adaptive can really be for you. So I mean, at the end of the day, the charts here, they look great, but where does all this data actually come from? And as I touched on earlier, right, with the sheets, that is where the data is coming from. So let me actually point to you to a couple different sheets here. So again, think of these sheets as just a given model. What you're seeing here is a pretty standard sheet. Here you are seeing your accounts, on the row set across your months along the columns, right? So you're able to incorporate that granular detail. As I previously mentioned in the dashboards, you're always going to see these layers of detail, right? Your level structure, and then your versions, right? Always going to be there for you to play around with. And once this is all set up, you'll see lots of different intelligence baked into the system throughout. Here, you're going to just see some really nice items that you'll be able to kind of incorporate. You see here these grayed out numbers. Those numbers are just locked, and they're locked because the detail is based on a supporting schedule, different part of the solution. I'll definitely be able to guide you and show you a little bit of that. Then you have these green numbers here that are locked as well. These actually represent your actuals. This is a nice capability that Adaptive has because, as you have your integration and that data comes into Adaptive, you're just going to just tell it where you want that to come in. So right now we have 3 months. As April is all set, now those April numbers will come in and overlay on top of those budget numbers. So now you'll have that. So again, it's a forecast version, so you have that available to you. You'll see these blue tick marks all around. Those blue tick marks just really mean that those cells are made up of a formula. And you can see the formula right here. Something very straightforward like an A times B, but these formulas can have a lot more logic, a lot more sophistication to give you the flexibility that's needed. And then you're also able to just go right in and start hand keying your numbers, right? So if we just go right in, just type them in, whatever you want them to be, go in, just like that, whatever you want them to be. You can even take advantage of some nifty items. Maybe everything else throughout the rest of the month, year, should I say, has to be the same. So we can just copy that information forward, breaks it right in. You can also incorporate some kind of increase. So if you want to increase these numbers here, just go doing a quick adjustment, do an increase. I'm just going to give it a 10% increase, something simple, and just updates that amount instantly. So it just gives you that detail there. But a lot of the times, it's just as straightforward to just know what the total annual number is going to be. It's hard to kind of know what's going to be every single month. So you can just go right in, type in a very random number in here, gives you this apply breakback method. This is really nice because it highlights some intelligence that's automatically built into Adaptive. This is just really telling you that it's going to take that total, proportional break it back. What's mostly really common is just taking what it was last year and using that trend going forward. So you really have a lot of options there. So I'm just going to okay that, and you'll see how that just walks right in there. So that just gives you some good insight how easy it is to incorporate some of this logic in there. And you can also add some notes in here, right? So you can just go right in, add a note, kind of similar to how you can add a note in Excel. I'm just going to call this a new feed just to keep it pretty simple. And now you can see a little red tick mark appear right there. And that's what's going to tell you that there's a note there. And what's nice about these notes are that they will carry throughout the solution. So if you want that note to appear on a report, it will be there. So now what we need to do is see some incremental granularity. So we'll just need to create another sheet with some more of these details. Let me actually just pivot over to a different level to kind of show you where that information is coming from. So I'm just going to go into my marketing department, part of my structure. For marketing, it might be really just straightforward. You might just want to be looking at this by an account. But as you can see here, the marketing account is grayed out, right? So as I mentioned earlier, it's locked. But now, to see a little bit more detail here, let's dig into that a little bit more, because you definitely want to see that context. So here we're just going to click into it, and we'll go into this explore cell. So this explore cell for me is, I really love this explore cell capability. It's one of the features that really stands out and really big differentiator with Adaptive. Here, the explore cell is just really going to give you that context of what we're actually looking at. So that 5,000, you're seeing that it's based on this account, but now we can continue to follow that bouncing ball. So let's click into that. So this particular item is based on this campaign, right? So if you have multiple campaigns, you'll see them all here. But what's also nice about this being in this explore cell is that it allows you to point directly to where these campaigns are coming from. So let's go into that marketing plan. So, as we click into that marketing plan, now you're going to see this is that supporting schedule, if you will, right? That's going to now show you everything that's in there, right? So here again, you have your levels, your versions. Now you have, these can be a pick list, so you don't have the ability to just add things in there for no reason. So those are just set there that you define, but you can also assign them to particular products or any other dimension. So again, really up to you how you want to define that. Or you can have the option to hand key details in there as well. So again, a lot of flexibility there to just kind of give you what you need there. This is really in essence one of those what we call a model sheet, right? So we saw a standard sheet first. This is a model sheet concept, which I'll continue to show you. But this is a type of sheet that gives users a lot of flexibility. Okay. So next up is a little bit of the workforce planning, and then after that we're going to touch on the revenue planning as well. But a main takeaway is to look at all of these concepts through your lens and to think about how they would be converted to your business. In this particular instance, we just have this particular levels, but let's actually bring it up one level here, right? So I have access to the entire organization, to US. You and your organization will be able to define, the certain security access rights. So if, not everyone needs to see it to this level, maybe below that is all they need to see. So you'll be able to really set that up. So Adaptive has really robust security access rights. So here you can see, again, as I mentioned, that model sheet concept. So the thing to really understand with the model sheets are that every column that you see here is customizable for your particular needs, right? So this is very typical. But when it comes to personnel, it's all about planning by named individuals or by positions. You can incorporate things like titles, residence for taxes, right? Because every state has different rates for the taxes, and all these other pieces, start dates, end dates, right? So all this is really there for you to be defining to your needs. But also to show you another example here, this is really just another way of, or another view of having a workforce plan, right? So this is still being planned by a named individual, but here you can actually see that we have captured employees that can also be either union or non-union. The nice thing about the defined logic is that as the calcs change, depending on the selections made, and also from the personnel assumptions that we also define, right? So those assumption sheets that you can define for drivers and things like that. But this is just one example of different way that you can incorporate your different perspectives, or different views of how you want to work. So that right there is just a little bit of the workforce plan. Now let me actually bring you into the product revenue sheet, right? So this is just another type of sheet. This is what we call a cube sheet, and this is where it could be a little bit more into the manufacturing type concepts. These cube sheets are really powerful. Most solutions out there do have cube sheets, but that's all they have, right? A big differentiator of Adaptive is its ability to have different types of sheets and make them purpose-built for what is actually needed. Here, you'll actually see again that this sheet is based on the structure, right? Those levels. And again, you're just creating that based on your setup. Also, across customers. You can go in here and see you have a list of all your customers, or maybe it's just the top 5, top 50 customers, depending on their the impact to your business. You can have a list of all of your products. This can also have a parent-child relationship, all the way down to the SKU level. Again, Adaptive has a lot of flexibility depending on what your needs truly are. But there are a lot of ways to manipulate these sheets that you're working on. Here, this particular cube sheet works a little bit like a pivot table. Let me actually show you what I mean by that. What if we want to just move these customers over on top of our units? We bring that in. And now you can see right there, everything just kind of comes in, and you'll see all the details there for all the units by that customer, by all the customers, right? The units is now used as a filter. So that's just one way that you can kind of like look at that detail. Or you can actually go in and make some additional layers to it, right? So here, maybe we can actually now look at our revenue by customer and by product. And now that just adds that layer of detail there as well. So now it's giving you those capabilities to see all those customers, right? Products, and it's all right there. So by units, because we're still on the units. So that just gives you, again, a lot of different ways that you're able to really just play around with the data within Adaptive. Let me actually just bring it right back to my default view. So I mean, at the end of the day, there are lots of other details here where we are calculating, things like standard costs, per unit costs, variable costs. All those details are right here at your disposal. And a lot of this information is actually, pulling from or being driven by an assumption sheet. Let me actually bring you to this assumption sheet. Still, these assumption sheets are more for those global drivers that can be utilized throughout the organization that then are used to impact the financial impacts. But here you can see it's still utilizing that same cube sheet concept. So here you're seeing one area where we can capture all our different costs, prices per units, material cost per unit, labor costs, overheads, everything you can think of. These are just some of the more standard basic ones, but at the end of the day, you'll be able to design these for your particular requirements, right? So as granular and as specific as you want them to be. So those are just some nice capabilities there. But now, again, to bring you back into showing some other examples, another way that revenue can happen could be as an example you see in this particular sheet. As you can see, there's a bit more going on this particular example. Here we capture sales, but also on some production and inventory concepts, right? So that's more detail that's a little bit more relevant for your particular needs. This is also a cube sheet, right? Because again, these are purpose built for what you want them and how you want them to be utilized. But here, the sheet's actually built by the level again, by the product, utilizing standard cost and bill of materials. So as you step through, you'll see how we capture units produced with calculations utilizing that against standard cost. That in turn can drive some balance sheet items for finished goods or even WIP. We can also see where the inventory is calculated. All of these details are being captured here. The inventory for this example is quite basic, but we've created very detailed production plans by line, based on capacities, by manufacturing sites where constraints like downtime can even be layered in. So things that that you might not think of can be incorporated that do have impacts, you'll be able to layer into Adaptive. But at the end of the day, like those other items I highlighted, some of these are actually utilizing some of those drivers. Let me show you some of these details here. So these are some assumption accounts that can be utilized. Here we have standard cost sheet. All right, this is a very basic sheet, but you can capture much more detail, again, to your needs. These are all inputs but they also can be integrated from other systems. But there are a lot of different options to bring this data into Adaptive, right? Excel, you name it, you'll be able to bring it in. Then you have bill of material item cost. This particular sheet, pretty straightforward as well, but this is really just building up those bill of materials showing the cost for the items that go into that particular manufactured product, right? So you can see the item here, what the cost is. That's again the account that you're looking at. So that's another way that you can layer that in. And then you have, your bill of material item product sheet. Again, this assumption is really just taking those costs that we just defined for those items, and now we're just capturing them, showing how that's going to impact the actual finished good, right? So you go the assembly, by that cost, right? So you have all that going in there. So it's really like the recipe, if you will. So those are just some of the key capabilities that you'll be able to do that there. But now we're just taking all this data that we're building out in these sheets, and now we're going to take that data and generate the reporting that we're going to need. And that reporting is really the final piece that I'm going to cover for you folks. So now, if I come in here, so this is just one type of report, but as you can see here, we have a lot of different reports that you can create, unlimited reports at your disposal, and you're going to see really how nice these can be for you and how you can dig into them. So reporting really is where we're all putting everything together, right? We can go, of course, and create any kind of obligatory report that's really strictly looking at month-on-month variance, looking at actuals versus budget, pretty standard reporting. But they are standard, but they are very dynamic, right? So, you can go right into these different areas and you'll be able to click in and see, explore cells, kind of see behind the scenes, again, as you saw previously. So you really have a lot of those options at your disposal. You can just, everything is dynamic. You'll be able to click down into it, just really the way you want to define it. So it's all right there for you. But again, to show you some other examples, here, we can start, looking at things to drive home specifically on some of these items, like maybe having a product P&L or a report on some stats, some product stats. This particular product P&L, now that we've captured all of the details that we're playing with, this is now a nice clean report that's showing each of my products giving their simple gross margin, right? You can see it there. Very simple, right? But again, just completely reiterate it, you'll be able to really define every single bit of data that you want to and really have that flexibility there. But this really just gives you a nice snapshot, right? By product, giving you that gross margin, the revenue, cost of goods sold, and that gross margin. And then, as I mentioned, just another simple report. This one's a product stats report. And this is really just for some of those metrics that we covered throughout, right? Here we might want to look at metrics like units produced, all of the associated, per unit costs that are incorporated into that revenue, and then by the product, of course, as well, right? So you can see all the production stats, sales stats, inventory stats, right? So everything that you can possibly think of, you'll be able to incorporate here in these reporting, this web reporting within Adaptive. You have so much detail and flexibility at your fingertips. The sky truly is the limit when it comes to your reporting needs within the solution. Which then brings me to the last piece that I wanted to highlight for you folks. And that is the Office Connect, right? So this, as you can see, is an Excel file. It's not Excel in that typical sense, right? This is essentially an add-in that you'll have. And all this information, the key is that the data is pulling from Adaptive. It's linked, right? So if I click here, it says linked cells. Everything that just got highlighted, this is all directly connected to Adaptive, right? To the actual cloud solution. So you never have to worry about links breaking, formulas breaking. As we all know, if we click in here, most Excel reports are going to have, really tremendously large formulas. Here you can see it's just a number. Again, the data, the calculations, those are all coming from Adaptive, from the solution. So you never have to worry about the connections being broken. So what if now, you have this set and now you're good to present this, but you need now the most up-to-date information. So February's done, March is done. Let's bring that March data in. So most of the times, if you're working in Excel, you have to just insert columns and add that detail in. You don't have to do any of that here, right? You don't have to worry about it. And this is a trailing 6 months, so you don't have to worry about deleting anything as well. So all you have to do is take advantage of the calendar that's built right in. We're just going to move it over 1 month. Again, you can go day by day if you so choose to, but I'm just going to go to the end of the month. And then I'm just going to refresh all the sheets. So that's going to take care of all of these. And just like that, you can see how October is now there. March popped in without me having to do anything, and nothing broke down as well. And now what if we actually have to add some more information into these reports, right? We now know these expenses are good now. We want to include them. So it's very easy to add them in. Just come in here on the left-hand side. You're going to have your structure, what you have available to you. Here are your accounts. These are expenses. So we'll find our expenses right here. And now taxes down to other. We'll just highlight them here and then refresh. And instantly pops right in. So now you save this down. Next month, next quarter, however often you need to refresh these reports. Again, you never have to fix them, never have to change them. You just change the date that you're pointing to, and all the new updated information will pull right in. So again, and now as you go into all these other sheets as well, you'll see everything has changed as well. So again, really, really powerful. And what the nice thing about the Office Connect capability is that it also works with Word or PowerPoint. So if you have to view this information here, right? Instead of having to copy, paste, as you make changes, you have to copy, paste again, and then you have to play around with the formatting. You never have to worry about that. Here, you just refresh it. And as you can see, instantly moved and changes that information to now the March number. So, or the most up-to-date information that you need to look at. So really, that is, the power of Office Connect, and that is the power of Adaptive. It just gives you instant capability to see all, and make changes, do your analysis, do your reporting, all in one place. That single source of the truth. But I do hope that the demonstration gave you a sense of how Adaptive can help improve your planning process and your reporting process, of course. But I do thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Lee, back to you.
Thanks, Alberto. So now that we've seen a sample of some models in action, then the next steps for us to think about are, how do we want to put the model into use? So this is where we want to start thinking about the finance, thinking about the strategy behind it. What metrics are applicable to the company? So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we have all the parts, all the components. Now, for example, you can't calculate capacity utilization if you're not storing your total available capacity somewhere. Anytime we have an X times Y, an X divided by Y, a ratio, some kind of a formula, we need to make sure that the X and the Y are both in the system. So we want to make sure that they're all stored. We also want to think about what kinds of analytics do we want to do, specifically on our products. We want to think about both, how do we want to separate one product from another, but we also want to think the exact opposite and think, how do we want to group them back together? We may want to look at something generally. Maybe we look at our products by category, by brand, things like that. But we also may want to look at it really granular, really detailed, by size, by color, by package type, pieces like that. All of the different aspects when you're doing your analytics, we say buy. I want to look at it by something. We need to make sure that we have all the information to either merge or differentiate that aspect of buy. And Justin, if you can go back to the previous slide, please. We also want to think about our calculations. Okay? We want to think about what kind of a planning approach do we want to do? Do we want to plan revenue as a driver based where we're going to put units times price and we need to have our units in the model and our price? Or do we simply want to do a growth rate where we're going to increase by X%? Okay? We want to think about it on the workforce side when we're looking at compensation. Do we want to calculate out by specific person, or do we want to do something a little bit more blended where we look at an average head count? Okay. We also want to think about it on time. What kinds of time aspects are we looking at? Are we looking at things, do we plan quarterly? Do we plan monthly? Do we plan weekly? Some customers even plan all the way down to the day. Okay? And we want to think about what kind of rates are we looking at. We know that we look at average costs, average values and ending values when we think about balance sheet, but when we're looking at our rates, how do we want to calculate all those out? All of these aspects are the details that could be stored in the planning analytics model. Okay? But we also want to think about something that we want to remember is this is not just a way to replicate your existing modeling process. This is also a great opportunity to reassess your existing items. Okay, we can think about this on our report side. The recreation of these reports is a key task during the implementation. And this is our opportunity to take a look at all the reports that we currently have and figure out what do we really need. I like to break them down into 3 categories. I like to break down my reports when I do something like this into must have, nice to have, and can be eliminated. Okay, must have. These are the items that need to be converted. These are the reports that are required to be available as soon as the new system is active. Okay, nice to have. These are important reports also, but these aren't the ones that are required for go live. These are the ones that can be recreated over time. And this is where you start thinking about the who does what. Do you have these reports built for you? Do you build them? Do you train new users and use them as that opportunity? Okay. But this third one is probably the most important. This is where we think about reports that can be eliminated. Maybe you have reports that are redundant to other reports, or maybe you have some reports that in the long run, after you think about it, that there's no significant value to them, and that's hard to do. That it's really hard to justify. I have a report that maybe I don't need. One example, we had a client that we were working on that had over 1,000 reports that they wanted to recreate. So we worked together, we reviewed, we optimized, we merged together what they had, and we took that list of 1,000 reports and brought it down to 98 reports. We got rid of over 900 reports that we found were being produced, but they didn't really have a business benefit. And sadly, we even found that a lot of the reports weren't even being looked at. This was a great opportunity because not only did it help them on their planning process, but it drastically simplified their reporting process. Okay. But this is also where we can redefine that overall process. This is where we want to think about the granularity of how we do our planning. It's where we want to think about, do you want to plan by item or by group? Do you want to plan by specific department, by specific store or branch or manufacturing location, or do you want to plan by region? Okay. It's also where you can make the determination of who's going to be doing the inputs. We call it the centralized or the decentralized approach. This is the opportunity to have some of your end users do much more data entry instead of just having a few people do the entry for everybody. It eliminates a lot of the redundancy. It'll allow the main finance team to do their job more, to do more analysis and less data entry. A lot of new great opportunities that we can think about in correlation with the implementation. And now I'm going to turn this back over to Justin to wrap things up.
Thanks very much, Lee. So hopefully you all got value out of today's webinar. Of course, as you can see, there's a much deeper dive that can be had within Workday Adaptive Planning. It's a very valuable tool, and there is a lot of value that our consulting team can provide to you as well. We do encourage you to learn more about Revelwood and our implementation approach by visiting our website at revelwood.com. While you are there, we also encourage you to visit our Knowledge Center, where we offer tips and tricks about all aspects of the planning process. A lot of those tips and tricks come from Lee directly himself. Technical tips on adaptive planning, planning tips about the budgeting process, and various tips on other business aspects of your FP&A model. And finally, myself or one of my colleagues will be reaching out over the next few days to try to put a 15-minute follow-up call on your calendar. It would be greatly appreciated if you could share your feedback with us on the webinar today and let us know how we can help in the future. So once again, either me or one of my colleagues will be reaching out within the next few days for a 15-minute follow-up, and we do greatly appreciate you accepting that invite. So once again, thanks for attending and have a great rest of the day.